What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Makeshift Managers Podcast. As always, I'm Austin. He's Devin. We missed you last week because I had some work obligations out of state, so it was a little to do the show, unfortunately. And now I caught COVID, so now we're good to go. So now we're really set in. So let's go ahead and get started. Legal tampering started with free agency today, so there's a lot going on, but funny enough, not a whole lot enough to affect. Oh, Devin died. Okay. So, I'm going to assume Devin hit the X by accident.
I accidentally hit my back button on my mouse, but I had just kidding. Congratulations. You thought I was gone.
Oh, man. That's too good. Like,
You
not
should
here
have
for
seen
2
my
weeks, and then,
face.
all right, quick show.
I literally I was trying to go back on this screen, and then it went. My mouse cursor was on this screen. I'm like, this isn't good.
Oh,
Help!
man.
I'm in danger.
That is too funny. All right, just get into it. Dynasty wide receivers. Number 1. Explain yourself, sir.
See, I had Justin Jefferson as if we did this podcast last week, Justin Jefferson's my number 1 dynasty receiver. And to be fair, the separation between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson is about the length of my facial hair right now that's not on my lip. It's insane. Like, as good as Justin Jefferson has been, while healthy, Jamar Chase has been as good stride for stride. And the main reason why I put Jamar in front of him currently, to be fair, it shouldn't even be warranted. After the year Jefferson had, he could be easily the number 1 guy. I think this will get more clicks, honestly. But I do think quarterbacks matter, especially for fantasy receivers. You'll see it later in the list with guys that are inheriting some less than stellar options. I don't know who's going to be throwing passes to Justin Jefferson after Kirk Cousins leaves. I do know for the next 8 years, Jamar Chase is probably catching passes from Joe Burrow. That means something to me. He's about a little over a half a year younger than Jefferson. He's going to get paid. I just, for everything Jefferson has going for him talent-wise, I think Jamar has that, plus a bit more explosion in his route. I think Jamar's a better athlete. Jefferson's probably a bit better with the jump ball, but you could really lean either way. Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in football right now based upon the season he had last year. But Jamar Chase put up over 1,000 yards in 12 games last year, and he almost hit double-digit touchdowns. And if you extrapolate that for the full 17, he's finishing with around 1,600 yards and probably around 15 touchdowns, give or take. Like, love Justin Jefferson. For me, when it comes down to the quarterback situation and the long-term stability. I think Kirk Cousins is great for Jefferson. I just really am scared of the life after Kirk, which is weird because Kirk Cousins is considered mid, but he's been a top 10 guy over the last 2-3 years with Jefferson. And we're going through an offseason where Adam Thielen is no longer on the roster. KJ Osborne will have to be a wide receiver too. And their best tight end is no longer TJ Hawkinson. So I do think the Vikings are going to deal with a lot of different coverages coming into this year with the fact that they don't have Adam Thielen or a top tight end in TJ Hawkinson. I just think Jefferson's going to have to get a bit more creative in terms of the team's play calling in ways to get him open. Because he can outrun anybody. He can catch at the high point with anybody. We saw it in the Bills game. He's a one-man wrecking crew. But for me currently, Jefferson has his path is less clear moving forward than Jamar Chase feels to me. Because even if Jamar Chase has had the situation where T. Higgins got moved for a draft pick in the next 2 to 3 years, I still think with a Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase is a safer floor in terms of just not getting killed on these double and triple teams.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that for sure. And you're right. Joe Burrow is going to be a Bengal for a long time. Supposedly at some point he'll get a massive extension, and hopefully Jamar also gets an extension for both of those guys to get paid and to hang out with each other until the end of time. With the Vikings, for me, is that it's hard to compare the offenses. Kevin O'Connell really put a charge in that Vikings offense, which was nice to see. And Kirk Cousins, like you said, has been trashed for these last couple of years for some apparent reason. But he's been good the past 2 years. He's basically had to carry the team on his back because his defense can't do anything to save their lives and give him, more than 5 seconds on the bench before he has to go back out there and score again. Kirk Cousins finished as the quarterback 6 last year. That's pretty good. He's 34 years old. He's been balling out the past 2 years. I think he can do it a couple more times as long as he has Kevin O'Connell and a bad defense. He's going to have to score a shit ton of points, and I think a shit ton of points is going to have to go through Justin Jefferson. Like you said, they lost Hawkinson. They lost Thielen. They got KJ Osborne, which – had some boom games here and there, but is it really like the best number 2 guy? Probably on the lower pole of that, honestly. And they could even lose Dalvin Cook, so they might not even have a decent running game. So it's really going to lean into Jefferson, and they're going to cover him. They're going to double. They're going to triple him. I just think Justin Jefferson is going to be able to be that guy to where that he's just going to find a way. And I think he can do it, at least find a way for the next 3 to 4 years with Kirk Cousins. Like, obviously, I don't know what life looks like after Kirk Cousins for sure, and that is the scary part for sure. You can, like you said, Jamar Chase is pretty much locked in his spot for probably the next 5 to 8 years with his quarterback on a very good team. I just think what Justin Jefferson's doing right now puts him in that spot, and he's the guy I would want first. And I'm not gonna bring injuries up with Chase either, because I think that's kind of weak to do. Like, he's gotten hurt, no big deal. He's good to go. To make it real easy though, across the board, whether you say Jamar or Chase, they're 1, they're 2. It's really as simple as that.
Because the biggest thing for me is Justin Jefferson's been the best receiver we've ever seen years 1 through 3 to this point in his career. Jamar Chase outpaced him his rookie year, and I think if Jamar Chase doesn't get injured, he probably tops the second-year receiving mark as well. Just looking at the numbers, he missed 5 games. He averaged 87 yards a game. It would have been close. And knowing Jamar Chase, he has huge weeks, which Jefferson really proved this year for me in fantasy. He had some monster weeks. And I do think there's not a safer floor in fantasy football than Justin Jefferson. If last year repeats itself, I think it's going to be harder for them to repeat what they did last year. I think a big thing for the Vikings was they had luck in terms of their positive regression. They won a lot of close games. Those are not all going to break their way. And a big thing for Jefferson, too, is Justin Jefferson is going to be a stud. And whenever Kirk Cousins does leave, he's already legitimized, but it will, in fact, put him on a higher tier if Kirk Cousins leaves and he's still putting up these 1,500-yard seasons. It's what made DeAndre Hopkins so compelling for the bulk of his time in Houston. He was stellar, for lack of better terms. Like, I'll look up the Hopkins numbers early in his career because he was getting balls thrown to him by guys that even historians can't think of off the top of their head.
Matt Shaw.
He was putting up over 1,000 yards with literal nobodies. And after he got Deshaun Watson, he was 1,500, 1,100, put up 1,400 his first year in Arizona. The wheels fell off. He got hurt. But a big thing for me is the security of having a stud quarterback. It's what made me taper off of Devonta Adams a little bit, losing Aaron Rodgers. And it's why he's kind of hurting in my standings this year, because Jimmy Garoppolo is now the starter in Vegas. Quarterbacks matter for wide receivers. Coaches matter for wide receivers. There's a reason why everybody gravitates to Patrick Mahomes' newest weapon. Certain guys are quarterback proof, but everybody tends – it's impossible for a receiver to throw the ball to themselves unless you are Marcus Mariota or Brett Favre. It's just how it works. Jefferson, it's 1A, 1B for me. I have a slight edge to Jamar right now just because of the security I feel with him moving forward in Cincinnati, because there are 2 truths in Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's the starting quarterback, and Jamar Chase is their weapon of the future. Joe Mixon is expendable. T. Higgins can be flipped for picks. And I trust the organization to be able to retool the rest of the pieces on offense around those 2 to keep it fresh. And like I said, Jefferson can come out and legitimize himself as the one easily in my mind. He comes out and he's just getting 100 yards again per week, then It's just the way it's going to be. And until he doesn't have Kirk Cousins, I can't complain about it. But if I had a dynasty roster, I think I'm comfortable having Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson. But in a 1 year redraft, I will take Jefferson over Jamar.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I think Jefferson is the safest floor at receiver. And that's even with Cooper Kupp doing what he did the first half of the year. From what I've heard, Stafford's arm is pudding. And outside of the 2 years Cooper Kupp has been alien, he's been wide receiver, back end wide receiver one-ish. Like, he's not extraterrestrial like some of these guys really are.
Yeah. Yeah. Say it 10,000 times over. These guys are 1 and 2. They're going to be flipping around all season long between people's rankings, depending on big games, depending on the team around them. But we expect the Bengals to be good for a long time. The Vikings are the ones with question marks. So Jefferson, honestly, I could flip them at any time. But in this current moment, on March 13th, 2023, it's Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
But my boy CeeDee Lamb is at number 3.
I don't get the anti CeeDee Lamb rhetoric. Like, I'm looking at this list and he's number 3, which makes sense. It makes me happy. AJ Brown feels a bit hot. AJ Brown being at 4 on this list isn't crazy. I love AJ Brown. I just like some younger guys is the problem. Age for me is huge in Dynasty in terms of receiver. The younger you can be with competent, because the thing is, being young is one thing. Being young and extremely productive is a completely different thing. CeeDee Lamb is a player that has played 3 full seasons in the NFL. And he finally had a season where he played all 17 games. He played 16 both years. He didn't start in 3. He didn't start in 2 of them his first 2 years. But I digress. This is a guy that has only gone up in targets year over year, only gone up in receptions. If you look at his box score for his seasons over the last 3 years, it's a constant upward progression. You cannot complain about the production from CeeDee Lamb. And I get it. There were times when people were complaining, could he be the one? I don't think there's many guys I would take at his age as the one over him, not named Jamar Chase or AJ Brown or Justin Jefferson. I think AJ Brown is very good. I think AJ Brown is a little old compared to Justin Jefferson or to CeeDee Lamb. There we go. But CeeDee's great. He has a solid quarterback in Dak Prescott who is locked in long term. CeeDee is going to get that second contract from Dallas because they have nobody else to pay. Michael Gallup sucked this year. I can't name you the third starting wide receiver on the Cowboys. That's how bad it was at times.
Probably Noah Brown.
Cole Beasley, for all I know. Noah Brown wasn't even that bad. But Dalton Schultz is going to be gone. Tony Pollard's back for another year. The offensive line should be decent. Who was the guy? Who did you guys draft with your first round pick last year? Tyler Smith, absolute stud.
Yes, there you go.
Steal of a pick. I remember you were like, I don't know about this. And Tyler said, hold my beer. But the Cowboys are not going to go anywhere. They were the second best team in the NFC East, and that is saying a lot because they were probably the 4th or 5th best team. They were probably the 4th best team in all of the NFC, maybe even 3rd last year. So this is a team that I expect to be competing next year. It's a team that I expect to continually feed CeeDee Lamb. Because if they are not going to, unless they make a splash in this draft, they don't have many options outside of him on the perimeter to make things move.
Even if they make a splash in this draft, say, I don't know, Jackson Smith and Njigba. I'm just naming somebody. I don't think Jackson's going to fall that far, but let's just say JSN falls to the Cowboys at 25, whatever the number is. It's a boost for CeeDee because it was obvious that Dallas had a great defense, again, numbers-wise, and they could put up the numbers, but it was obvious on certain games that they lost that they needed a guy like Amari Cooper to be able to catch those hits that weren't going to CeeDee, and we were struggling to find a number 2. If somebody like JSN falls to the Cowboys and they get a number 2, it's massive for CeeDee because now they have somebody else to worry about. Now they have to cover somebody else because CeeDee is going to get the targets. Got 156 last year. He'll probably hit that number again. And that 156 targets, 107 catches for 1359 and 9 touchdowns is with 5 games with rush. who couldn't throw the damn ball to save his life.
That is actually a huge point. I think if you get a full season of Dak, I think CD's finishing, at least in terms of yards, relatively closely.
15.
Yeah, 15, possibly pushing 16, depending on how those games pan out. Because averaging 80 yards a game, that puts him right underneath Jamar Chase, and he's a ways away from Justin Jefferson. But Jefferson literally averaged over 100 yards per game.
Yeah.
I just think CD's the perfect combination of size, speed, and hands. He had a 69% catch percentage, which is really good. Like looking at Jamar, looking at Jefferson, it's right in line with those guys. And when you have 156 targets, you're going to have a lot of receptions. And if you're playing in a PPR league, which you should be, it's 100 points off rip. I just like CeeDee Lamb. He's physically everything you would expect out of an X receiver. 190 pounds, 6'2", speed for days. He is the pager that was these Oklahoma receivers over that stretch of time. Marquise Brown was supposed to be a hit, and he was good with the Ravens in times. The hands didn't follow through. He was actually excellent over a stretch in Arizona with Kyler Murray. I love that fit. CeeDee Lamb is everything Marquise Brown was supposed to be coming out, and then some. And outside of a 23, and he's 23 years old. So you're getting him at the same age as a Justin Jefferson at effectively a discount on price as the number 3 guy off the board.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can hate it. And he's a little bit older than Jefferson, if I'm correct, because he's 339 days into his 23rd year on the planet. So he will be 24 before the season starts, if I'm correct. But
yeah,
finally has the elite year, and the production's constantly gone up to this point. There's nothing telling me he's not going to then take next season. Maybe he doesn't hit 1,400 yards. Maybe he doesn't get 12 touchdowns, but it's going to be within earshot. And I wouldn't be surprised if he one-ups last season.
No, yeah. If you miss out on Jefferson and Chase because somebody takes them stupid early, do not be afraid to grab CD. CD is going to produce as a Cowboy. I know Kellen Moore left, and the plays are going to be called by Mike McCarthy, and we're probably going to lose a divisional game. But right now, the offense clicks. Dak's a gunslinger. Now he can heave the ball, and he's going to throw the ball to CeeDee Lamb a ton. Literal only reason why I don't have Jalen Waddle at 4 is because he's a number 2. It's literally the only reason.
Jalen Waddle is T. Higgins if T. Higgins was on crack. That just for me. T. Higgins in most systems is a wide receiver 1. Jalen Waddle on every roster aside from the Miami Dolphins, the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'd even say, like, okay, besides the top 3 teams and his own team, he would be the wide receiver 1 effectively. Jalen, I like Amon-Ra. He's cool. What's cool is speed, because speed kills. And I don't think there's a faster receiver in the NFL than Jalen Waddle currently, aside from Tyreek Hill. And if it would be different, because the thing is, well, he's the wide receiver 2. Tell me another wide receiver 2 that puts up almost 1,400 yards with 8 touchdowns. He averaged 18 yards a catch last season. Is that replicable? Probably not in any other offense, but Tua literally almost died 3 times last season, and he still put up 1,400 yards.
I did exaggerate a little bit, though. The quarterback situation does have him. Real quick, just for clarification, we are just slightly switched. So I don't have Jalen Waddle like 12, but if they signed Mike White today. Not that means a whole lot, but I just don't think they want Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater backing up anymore.
I think that's brilliant. I think that raises his floor. Personally, if Tua's going to miss games, I'd rather have Mike White throwing the ball, because Mike White legitimized Garrett Wilson's Rookie of the Year campaign. And I get it. It's all speculation. But you can't speculate over 18 yards a catch in his second year. And it'd be one thing if he was dropping a bunch of passes, which his catch percentage left something to be desired at 64% this year. But then again, Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson were throwing him the ball, and Tua at times couldn't hit him in stride. If you were to give Jalen Waddle if you were to give Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, a Jalen Waddle, he would finish the season with 1,700 yards and probably 15 touchdowns. That is how game-breakingly stupid his speed is. And if because a good chunk of the plays you would see in Miami last year with Tua Tagovailoa, he's throwing the ball into spots and the receivers came back, which is fine. It's productive. But if there's someone that can hit this guy in stride, I'm telling you, this 1,300 is effectively the floor. And for a guy like CD who just came off his best year in year 3, it took 150 plus targets to get to 1,300. And that's nothing against CD Lamb. Jalen Waddle had 117 targets last year. He had 75 receptions. I don't think we've scratched the surface of what Jalen Waddle can be in an NFL offense. And that's the biggest thing for me. Because, and then back to my points about Justin Jefferson. I was wrong. TJ Hawkinson is still a Viking. I'll redact that with Amon-Ra, but that's better for Amon-Ra because more targets. So Jefferson, you're safe for now. He's probably safe for the rest of his career. What I'm talking about, there's not a single player I like more in fantasy football than Jalen Waddle. You can ask Austin. I drafted him absolutely everywhere, and I laughed my ass to the bank. And I didn't win a single dollar in fantasy this year. But Jalen Waddle was the single best return on investment of any of my rosters. He was a wide receiver 1 at the price of a wide receiver 2. And as long as Tyreek is in town, you're going to get him at a discount just because Tyreek is there. And in Dynasty, you grab him now. He's 24 years old. He's not going to be 25 by the time the season starts. Is it blasphemous to say that he's better than Devonta Smith? Because I believe that to be truth. And Devonta Smith in college was the first receiver to win the Heisman in almost 20 years. And he had this guy next to him. That's how good I think Jalen Waddle is. He's not even like super crazy. He's not even crazy big is the crazy part. He's 5'10", 182, but you can't stop him.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see where his career goes. I think year 3 is going to be better than this year was. It's the same thing if you're in redraft. Draft sophomore receivers. They will pay you back on the ADP as long as it's rounds 2 through 5. Anywhere you can get Jalen Waddle, I'm probably going to take him because he's probably going to be what, wide receiver 4, 5, 6 off the board, maybe even worse in redraft. It's
in redraft he'll go a little further because of guys like Diggs, Cup, and Adams.
I love Jalen Waddle. The Amon-Ra stuff is cool. So the Amon-Ra St. Brown stuff is cool. It's fun. He's just not the athlete you want him to be. He is a possession receiver. In terms of what we're talking about, in terms of the top end dynasty weapons you want to have for the next 10 years. Amon-Ra St. Brown is not Justin Jefferson. He's not Jamar Chase. He's not even CD Lamb. He's 6 foot, 197. He's a guy that's going to catch the ball and hold on to it. And he's going to score touchdowns. But I need to see him take the step this year for me. Personally, looking at my list, I wouldn't even be mad at myself if I put A.J. Brown at 5. Because A.J. Brown has had multiple 1,000-yard receiving seasons, and he just punctuated the best year of his career next to another wide receiver 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown put up 1,000 yards in a season where DeAndre Swift was on the sidelines more than he was on the field. A season where they traded away the second best pass catcher in TJ Hawkinson. His next best threat on the perimeter didn't play until week 12, and he had like 6 receptions on the year in Jamison Williams. I don't know how much more we're going to get out of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he was a crazy value his rookie year. I think he was a crazy value last year. He will continue to prove to be a value. But league winner Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably done. In terms of just downright floor as a weapon, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't think he will kill you any given week. As long as Jared Goff is throwing footballs, and if they get somebody in the draft to kind of be the heir apparent, that might boost his value. But he doesn't have the burner speed. He's not the catch point guy. His routes are good. He's good with the ball. Amon-Ra St. Brown is very good. He's not great. And that's the biggest thing for me. He's number 5 because he's young and productive, but I don't know how much more productive he is going to be. And if he comes out and puts up 1,500 with 10 touchdowns, I'll shut up. But
You heard it here
given the
first.
fact that he had the same guy throwing the ball for his entire career, when you have a guy in Jalen Waddle who put up 1,300 yards with Teddy Bridgewater, Tua for a chunk, like Waddle hasn't had the same starting quarterback his entire career, and he's finished with over 1,000 yards both years. There's just levels to me. Same thing with CeeDee Lamb last year. 5 games of Cooper Rush. Still puts up almost 1,400 yards. And I'm not going to explain Jefferson and Jamar Chase because I don't have to.
Right.
There's definitive levels. Amon-Ra's great. He has an NFL pedigree. He's a very strong receiver, which is why I like him. And his catch percentage is actually insanely good. He's got the best hands out of everybody in this category just based upon the catch percentage, which is not how we measure hands. But his career percentage is 74%. If you're throwing it his way, he's probably going to come down with it. So that's valuable. I need to see the top end at least 1 year.
Yeah.
Because he's improved year over year, yes. But we're not looking at the jump that we saw from CD. We're not looking at a jump that we saw because the Justin Jefferson jump was bigger than anybody really that we've seen out of these top 5.
Well, I think it's a special case too. I think there's something to be said for just talent isn't the word. Like obviously all these guys are talented, but when you get this nuclear jump like Chase and Justin have had, it's just not something you see every year. Like you don't see a jump. We don't see a jump like that we barely see it every 10 years, every 20 years. We just don't see it a lot.
The thing about receivers in fantasy is the best players tend to just consistently get better year over year. And I fully expect Amon-Ra to be better this year. I just wonder what the numbers are going to look like because I don't think a bad year is going to be where he has. I think he could have.
Well, I also expect Jared Goff to be better. I expect the whole team to be better.
He could, and that's a thing too because the team was better than expectations, and he had a great year. He had 11 yards per catch. He had 72 yards a game. He missed 1 game, so he effectively could have had 1,200 yards. I've yet to see the game-breaking potential of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the safe floor, lower upside, like high floor, low ceiling for me. He's not the guy I'm taking with my first pick at receiver. If I can have him as my wide receiver 2, he's the ultimate wide receiver 2 in fantasy for me. If you have a roster where he is your second best receiver weekly, you're going to win a lot of games. But if you're counting on him to swing with Chase, AJ Brown, Stephon Diggs, you're gonna be hard pressed because I don't know.
He realistically was my wide receiver 3 on one of my playoff
that's
teams.
The beauty in him because Jalen Waddle was my 2 in numerous leagues and it paid off extraordinarily. And realistically, everybody's gonna want Jalen Waddle like outside of the top 3, and then we'll get into like AJ Brown and them, who I think are wide receiver 1s on rosters. Even though Jalen Waddle as a 1 works for your fantasy team, there's just different levels and situations currently. But we're projecting over the sample because if I can have a guy for 3 more years than the other dude and the production's similar, give me the younger guy.
Yeah. AJ Brown.
I wish I could have put him higher. He's old. And that's a weird thing to say because he's not old. But in fantasy football dynasty terms, if you're not getting younger, you're getting older. And there's a window here.
He really had one of the quietest number 6. He finished number 6 in PR. That's one of the quietest seasons at number 6 I've ever seen.
I had the stack of Hurts and AJ Brown in your cousin's league, and I almost rode that to like a decent playoff finish. Everything falls out in that league for me always. I'm interested. I am interested to see what he does in year 2 with the Eagles, because AJ Brown could be 3 for me come end of next year, which is surprising. Actually, he could probably be 4 for me depending on how he finishes this year. Because
I think he could beat out Waddle and Brown, but I don't think he could beat out Lamb, Chase, or Jefferson. Something would have to catastrophically
he could catch CeeDee Lamb. I think if he puts up 16 or 1,700 and he has another 12 touchdown year, it's going to be close. Obviously, if CeeDee's putting up similar production, I'm going to go with the younger guy. Yeah. But this is a guy in AJ Brown who is sharing the field with a guy that you're going to hopefully hear later in the list, and Devonta Smith, both over 1,000 yards. CD didn't have that kind of support, which is a testament to him because he put up numbers without anybody really besides Dalton Schultz helping him on the perimeter. And I feel like this could be the floor with AJ a little bit. Like, I know you said you couldn't like hate on 18 yards per reception. AJ Brown averaged 17 per reception. That's a lot, especially with 88 receptions. He had 145 targets, one of the lower catch percentages, but then again, Jalen Hurts is still progressing. I expect that to rise as they play more. I don't think there's a better guy to just throw the ball to and tell him to go for it. Like, I think after the catch, AJ Brown's a top 3 threat in football, just in terms of playmaking. Like, he's not going to be the out of the backfield like Deebo Samuel, but they're similarly built. And I think AJ's hands are as sure as damn near anybody's in football. I love AJ Brown. I think, 4 is probably where we'll see him after this season. He could even be 3 for me, depending on what happens in Dallas. But for anyone that was doubting that he was a wide receiver 1, congratulations. You don't have to anymore. Because I was on the AJ Brown train in Tennessee. And the fact that they let him go is probably the best thing to happen to any player with the last name Brown since Antonio Brown watched Juju Smith-Schuster earhole Vontaze Burfict.
Oh, man. I mean, AJ Brown went to a much better team, a much younger team, a stronger team. And Jalen Hurts proved to everybody that he could throw the ball because people thought that he couldn't for some reason. The dude put up numbers. The dude is going to continue to put up numbers. Like I said, the Eagles are going to be a force for the next probably 2 to 4 years. And they're going to continue to put up numbers, even with their running game. AJ Brown still found a way to put up massive games. I was just looking at his list of games, and you're looking at 25.5, 11.9, 19.5, 14.5. A 6 thrown in there happens to everybody. 17.7, 39.6, 15.9, a 1 against Washington, but 10, 13, 27, 16, 19, 13. He's putting up double digits almost every single week. You can't ask for much more than that. What is this? What is this? Did he pay you to say this?
No, he didn't. DK Metcalf is Mike Evans' favorite impersonator. And I get that DK hasn't finished every season with 1,000 yards, but if you extrapolate the data, he's finished on average 1,000 yards per season to start his career. And on average, he's about 8 touchdowns. This is the floor of DK Metcalf. And I repeat, this is the floor of DK Metcalf. Because I am worried about Justin Jefferson if Kirk Cousins no longer... I'm not worried about Justin Jefferson. That's the wrong word to use. But I think DK is just one quarterback away from fully being unlocked. I think DK has the highest potential out of any of these guys at this age range to have a Randy Moss type renaissance. And I know Randy is a far better player. Randy Moss is probably the second best receiver ever, so that's sacrilegious to say it. But in terms of a player that I could see going nuclear any season, and I think sustaining it, it's DK Metcalf. In 2020, he put up 1,300 yards with 10 touchdowns, and he followed that up with 2021. He had 967 yards and 12 touchdowns. The catch percentage is improving. He had 64% catch rate as opposed to 58 the year prior. 141 targets. I expect the targets to continually increase because Tyler Lockett is only getting older. And I think at some point, DK is going to have over 100 receptions. And this is a guy that for his career averages 13 yards a catch. He is as physically imposing as any receiver in football. And it would be one thing if he was slow and lumbering, but he's constantly improving. He's one of the fastest guys in the NFL in terms of per pound. I just think...
Just ask Buda Baker.
And especially if the Seahawks can get their future quarterback in a draft like this, I think DK's value is going to consistently rise. Because the biggest thing with AJ Brown was he was great. His situation wasn't. DK has been better than AJ Brown, and his situation hasn't been much better. So This is more of a projection, and I feel like it's more myself telling the younger guys to prove it a little bit more, because DK is a number one, and I believe DK has been a number one for multiple years. And while he has not had the breakout stands AJ Brown up until this point, he even had a 1,300 yard season his second year in the league. So I just think DK is going to age well. And I think DK in a second stop is going to be even better than what we saw in DK in Seattle. I don't see how much worse he can get on the spectrum. Like, he's a guy that I'm looking forward to getting at a discount this year because the variance will be there. Week over week, you might not love DK Metcalf, but over a full season, he'll probably win you more weeks than he's going to lose you.
What Garrett Wilson?
Garrett Wilson's going to be fun if Aaron Rodgers comes to town for about 2 years.
I don't care if Rodgers comes to town or not. The dude got 1,100 yards with Mike White and Zach Wilson.
DK Metcalf put up 13.
You love second-year wide receivers.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I love second-year wide receivers in a redraft, because the thing about second-year wide receivers in Dynasty is you had to have them their rookie year. The value's baked in because they're going to be better. And if they're not, they're Elijah Moore. So hear me out. Garrett Wilson is great. Garrett Wilson is an absolute stud. Don't get me wrong. He put up 147 targets, 83 receptions. He had a lower catch percentage than DK Metcalf. And yes, I get it. Zach Wilson threw a lot of balls to Garrett Wilson's way. I understand. Garrett Wilson is 4 inches shorter than DK Metcalf. Garrett Wilson is 3 years younger than DK Metcalf. Garrett Wilson is also about 30 pounds lighter than DK Metcalf. I'm not saying Garrett Wilson is worse than DK Metcalf.
Situation isn't getting better. Geno signed a 3-year deal.
Well, I can say that his situation is not getting worse. And I can say the same thing about Garrett if Rodgers comes to town.
But Geno can get worse. That's what terrifies me.
Seattle has a top 5 pick.
Right, I understand that.
Seattle has a top 5 pick. If Seattle is smart, they're going to draft a quarterback if they are afforded the opportunity. Would you rather have Garrett Wilson and 2 years of Aaron Rodgers and whatever comes next? Or would you rather have DK Metcalf with Anthony Richardson, say, in a year and a half, 2 years? Because I don't know about you, but if you give Anthony Richardson, a guy with that athleticism, Richardson has a cannon, and if there's a guy that's going to catch balls from a cannon, it's DK Metcalf. He is probably one of the best at the catch point receivers that we have, based upon his build alone. There's not many guys that can out jump him to catch a pass. So physically speaking, I think DK is my freak at 6. I just think if all else fails, he's going to be just bigger and stronger and faster than most guys, and he's going to produce. I think we're going to see variance in Garrett Wilson. I don't think he's going to be bad. Would I be surprised if he doesn't hit his yardage mark from last year? He better score more touchdowns, because if he's not going to put up touchdowns, I don't see how he improves. Personally, this is an offense that if Aaron Rodgers does come to town, Breece Hall is the number 1 weapon in this offense. Elijah Moore is good. Corey Davis is borderline great over stretches in a New York Jets uniform. And Garrett Wilson is clearly the number 1, but I think Aaron's going to – I have to see – I have to physically see Garrett Wilson be the guy with Aaron Rodgers before I'm going to invest that much into him, unless you already drafted him. If it's a startup,
right?
If it's a startup, I might even be convinced to take Garrett Wilson over DK Metcalf. I'm just really high on the guy. I think DK could age extremely well in terms of the next couple of years, because I don't think he's fully broken out yet, and I think it's bound to happen. And you were talking about a division where Jalen Ramsey just got shipped out. DK's life is getting easier.
Yeah, it is. It is true.
You know what's better? Garrett Wilson plays Jalen Ramsey 2 times a year. Once again, my points are moot because it's Dynasty fantasy football rankings. I don't even have to defend the DK thing. It's just the way that I felt. DK doesn't get enough respect, damn it. Yeah.
This one's easy. He's still great. He's getting older. But
the thing about Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams is a guy that could put up 170 targets in a season, but Devontae Adams isn't going to a world track championship and beating everybody by 2 paces. I think Tyreek Hill's a better just on paper receiver than Stephon Diggs or Devontae Adams? Probably not. In terms of a fantasy football weapon until the wheels fall off, you know what's crazy about Tyreek Hill actually? He's younger than both of those guys. He's 28.
29.
He's 20. He just turned 29. So I'm taking the younger guy. I'm taking the guy that has a proven role in an offense with a number 2 that could be the number 1 in a lot of offenses. Like, that's the thing. Because Devontae has Hunter Renfrow, Tyreek has Jalen Waddle. And there's no better way to make space than having somebody across from you to help you create it.
Well, and here's the thing: you're taking a guy who finished number 2 last year in PPR, who put up 14.3 yards per catch.
Yeah.
And had one of the lowest touchdown totals he's had in the past 5 years. He is definitely going to get, if Tua could stay healthy, if he doesn't get Eddie Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson, the dude's putting up 10 to 12 touchdowns a year with 1,600 yards.
While you weren't looking, Tyreek Hill put up his best catch percentage since his sophomore year in Kansas City. And I'm talking he had a good year, 2021. He had 69.8%. But outside of 2017, the next closest percentage he had to 70 was 65.2 in 2019. Tyreek is a guaranteed 1,000 yards. And at this point, I'd say he's a guaranteed 1,200 with about 12 touchdowns. And if they're going to feed him the rock the way they did this previous season, I don't see how he doesn't finish with 1,500 yards. He put up 14.4 yards per catch on 119 receptions. And the crazy part is I don't think that that's an insane number with how he's used and with how impactful he is. As an athlete, he is freaky. He's the same height as Jalen Waddle, which is why this team is so stupid. You've got 2 literal these guys are literally speed demons. This is Speedy Gonzalez and his cousin Speedy Gonzalez, the second. Just on either side. You cannot stop them. And if you're stopping one of them, the other is taking it to the house.
Oh, man.
No, yeah, I don't love if you have Tyreek Hill, hold on to him. But I wouldn't move a ton of capital to get him.
Yeah.
But he's my favorite of the aging wide receivers.
Yeah,
in
100%.
the segment. I just think, wow, and especially after 170 targets. The biggest thing with him was like usage with Travis Kelce. There is no Travis Kelce anymore. Waddle's going to get 100 plus targets, but
he's got Mike Gesicki. It's fine.
Nah, he's going to leave. They didn't even franchise tag him.
However the hell you do it. I like Stephon Diggs a lot as long as Josh Allen is his quarterback because Stephon Diggs went on an absolute tear to start here, and he had one of the worst second halves ever. Week 14, he put up 6. Week 15, he put up 10. Week 16, he put up 4. Week 17, he put up 4. He put 23 in the last week of the season. But that stretch of 4 weeks of not putting up 30 points combined, he still finished number 4 in PPR. The dude is on one of the best offenses in the league, and he's the number 1 until further notice. He's 29. He's the same age as Tyreek, but Tyreek's just a little more dynamic with the ball. But I think as long as Stephon Diggs doesn't really get a whole lot of help because Gabe Davis is 1 catch for 80 yards and a touchdown, I still got to have Stephon in the top 10.
Stephon Diggs is cool. He's 30. For lack of better terms, he's 30. He's 29 right now. He's going to be 30 this time next year, or even like by the end of next season, he's going to be 30 years old.
So, but he's not 30 by this time next year. I'll be terrified.
No, he's going to be 30 at some point during the season next year, like right before the Super Bowl, I think. But the thing about Stephon Diggs, for me personally, is I don't see how much better he can get. I physically don't understand how he can get better. Josh Allen has to take another step. He will have to get 170 targets. He took 154, converted 108 receptions. He had 127 receptions in 2020. And that was by far his best season in the NFL. I think Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers in terms of route running and hands that we have seen in the league within his own era. But I always liked Stephon Diggs a little bit more as a wide receiver too. Like, don't get me wrong. He was only the wide receiver 2 to Adam Thielen for like 2 weeks. He was always the one, for lack of better terms.
Yeah.
But we've seen him with help around him. And it's about 1,000 yards a season. It's about 6 to 7 touchdowns. Unless Stephon Diggs just reincarnates Jerry Rice and he has the best 30s of a receiver we've seen since the 90s, I'm not going to invest highly in this guy. I would much rather have, as you see, Garrett Wilson at 9, because he's 23 years old. He's already put up 1,000-yard season. And with 4 touchdowns, it's not ideal, but there's room to grow. At his best, Stephon Diggs has put up 11 touchdowns in a season. He's never had a season where he's had over 100 yards per game. His career high in yards per reception was 17.9 in 2019. He doesn't have the big play potential. He has the target share with one of the better arms in football, but we've seen this before. Stephon Diggs is great. Stephon Diggs, if you have him as your wide receiver 1 in fantasy football, albeit besides the back half of last year, he's probably the safest floor outside of a Devontae Adams. I have no qualms with starting him. I have no qualms with drafting him in redraft. But in terms of building my team around this guy, I have to be competing. Unless you are competing for a championship this season, I don't see how you roster him. And that's why he's lower for me than a Garrett Wilson. Because Garrett Wilson's going to give you production, but you're not just worried about this year's production with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson can help you compete this year and 3 years down the road. For me in fantasy, especially in Dynasty, I don't want to get caught with the gun in my hand. That's never where I want to be. It's why people are so hesitant to trade for Travis Kelce, because when it's done, it's done. And there's no getting that time back from the past. And especially with receiver, after they hit 30 years old, there is a decline. Usually around 32 is when we see it. And you can say what you want, and Stephon Diggs is an insanely talented receiver, but you know who else is insanely talented, Austin? Julio Jones. Time fears no man besides Tom Brady. Besides Tom Brady and LeBron James. Those two. But beyond that, time is usually undefeated. And so if I can get a guy that's got 5 years until he hits 30 as opposed to 200 days, I'm going to lean the younger side, especially in Dynasty.
Can Garrett Wilson go anywhere if Aaron Rodgers news breaks, or you got to wait to see it?
I'll probably swap Garrett Wilson and Devontae, or not Devontae. I'll swap if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets like we all think he's going to. I'll probably push DK behind Tyreek and Garrett can be 8. Just because I think even Tyreek probably should have finished above DK for me. But I can't put Garrett over Tyreek. Not yet.
Okay.
Because I think Tyreek is the only guy over 27 that I think should age. Because the thing about athletes is they all age, but your hyper freaky athletes tend to age good unless they tend to age better unless they deal with an injury. So if Tyreek were to destroy his body in some way, yes, he's going to fall down the rankings. But he's relatively healthy. So as long as he stays relatively healthy, I have no worries about Tyreek Hill. His body is insane. His body doesn't make sense. And that's why I can kind of trust it.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson is not an athletic freak. Garrett Wilson fits that Stephon Diggs type mold. He is 6 foot. He's a prototypical receiver, but he's not your DK. He's not your Tyreek. He's not Jalen Waddle. He's great at everything, but he's not otherworldly at one thing, which separates some of these guys.
For reference,
there's an implicit bias with me. T. Higgins and I go back to his sophomore year. He was an absolute monster. So I digress. And T. Higgins had a better year this year than he did the year before, if I'm correct. Like, as the only reason T. Higgins isn't where DK Metcalf was is because he's the number 2 on his team. Like, he's the
well,
definitive
and
number
the thing
2.
is too with T Higgins for me is that he was with about Chase for what 6 games, and he still only finished 18. He didn't have like insane games while Chase was gone. And, like, he was hurt. He did miss a couple games. I get that, but it just he just doesn't. Olave basically virtually had the same season with a way worse quarterback. He's younger, and Olave just got an upgrade at quarterback.
T. Higgins is essentially Mike Williams with better marketing. Like, effectively, that I think T. Higgins is probably more talented in terms of route running, and he's younger, which helps him. I think T. Higgins is probably one of my favorite, like, throw it up and get it guys. I think the biggest thing for T. Higgins, I think the reason why I like him in Dynasty more than Olave is Olave is going to be a Saint for a very long time. T. Higgins is one of the only guys in my top 10 that I genuinely believe will find a different team when it's all said and done. And he's 24 now, and he's going to do that money after next year. So age 26, he's going to be in the A.J. Brown camp. Because I think he probably gets traded before he leaves the Bengals. Because I don't see how they pay Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, along with the other pieces they're going to have to pay to keep this core together.
Yeah,
in a perfect world,
the pieces they've already paid.
The thing about T. Higgins is, even though I coined him to Mike Williams because they're similarly built, T. Higgins is the best version of Mike Williams. Like, if Mike Williams were T. Higgins, I would be the happiest person on this planet. Looking at Mike Williams, he's had 2 seasons of 1,000 yards to his career. He's had 2 seasons of over 6 touchdowns. T. Higgins, from the jump, has put up 908 yards, 1,091, 1,029, catch percentages in the mid-60s, and he's had at least 6 touchdowns every year. Mike Williams can't even claim to have a catch percentage over 60%, aside from his second year up until this year. T. Higgins is probably in my top 5 favorite wide receiver 2 options. But the thing about T. Higgins is I think he has the largest room to grow of anybody on this list. Based upon the situation he has now, I expect T. Higgins to be the next A.J. Brown if he were to get traded. I could see him just taking a step and being in that top 5. I think he could go from 10 to 5 easier than a guy like out of my picks from 6 through 10, I think he can move up the easiest with a change of scenery. He just has so much more room as a weapon to be utilized because he's 109 targets, 110 targets, and he's only got 74 receptions as his career highs. And it's 13.9, 14.7 yards per reception. He's productive. He just does not get the volume. And if the volume does come, the production will match.
This COVID is starting to beat into a little bit. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. And I just want to talk about 2 players before we go here. So just kind of to show the rest of these. Let's talk about we both have Devontae at 13. Devontae's older.
Garoppolo hurts.
Yeah, realistically now it's a downgrade at quarterback.
But Carr was a downgrade too. So I think McDaniels is going to get the ball to Devontae. I think he's baked in 150 targets.
So the two players we can jump in on for quick. So I got Cooper Kupp at 12. You have him at 15. So let's talk about Cooper Kupp, and then you have Devontae Smith at 14. So let's talk about Devontae real quick. So Cooper Kupp, obviously, past 2 years on finished number 1 in 2021 or 2022, 2022 season, and then gets hurt as he was on pace to be number 1 again for this last season. Stafford's falling apart. The entire team around him is falling apart. I think Cooper can find himself again not in the rankings per se, because he is older at this point, I believe. We'll see how old Cooper Kupp is. Cooper Kupp, 29.
30. So he's going to be 30.
Age is going to keep him out of top 10. in terms of dynasty rankings, but
by the
I
season
think
start, he's going to be 30.
Okay, so it's going to keep him out of the top 10 because he's older and he's kind of in that same area as Stephon. Tyreek's just a different breed, but he's able to break in the top 10. Devontae Adams. But I do think he could still find himself in the top 10 in PPR in terms of points. But there is just that little bit of concern that kind of, I have Cooper Kupp at 12, but it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Flimsy. Like, I feel like he could fall down at any moment.
I think he's already fallen down. This is a guy that lost basically a full season due to an ACL tear, and he just lost. He's missed a full season of football. With the 2 seasons there, he's been significantly injured. And outside of his absolutely nuclear season and his start last season, he's been a wide receiver too in terms of finishes. Outside of the 1900, he's finished over 1,000 yards once. Granted, he put up 974 the year before his explosion, but it took 200 targets. And I know he's extremely talented. I know he is absolutely tenacious. He's one of the bulkier receivers at his position at 6'2", 208. Fool me once, can't get fooled again. Cooper Kupp is who Tom Brady wishes Danny Amendola was. And I'm not going to get caught with the gun in my hand. Cooper Kupp was fun. I had Cooper Kupp the year he went nuclear, and I didn't win a single fantasy championship, which is messed up.
Also same.
But to sit here and say a 30-year-old is going to put up 1,500 plus the year after he's done for the season due to like a debilitating injury, I think it's wishful thinking, especially when you pair that with Matthew Stafford's noodle arm and a team that's held together by basically blank checks. I think the Rams are on the verge of capsizing, and I just don't want to be a part of it. There are guys that are more talented, in my opinion, in terms of like athletic ability and have better situations. Jimmy is not my first choice at quarterback, but Davante Adams is good enough to where I think he's going to persevere through it. And while I think Cooper Kupp could finish with a similar season to Davante, I think Davante is going to have that upside. I think Davante is still probably one of the best red zone threats in football. And Cooper Kupp can get all the targets in the world. I don't want to bet on the guy where I'm not sure if he's going to finish the season, because at receiver and in the NFL, the average career is about 6 years. So anytime you have over 6 years of production from a guy, it's gravy, I just don't want to get caught with the gun in my hand. Cooper Kupp is going to go in the top 2 rounds of drafts. I'm believing in a redraft or even 3rd round. There's certain points where you have to take the guy at value, but for his price in drafts, I'm not going to pay it. So there's a reason why I didn't roster him in any leagues this year. He was not worth a 1st-round pick to me. He would have had to do better to pay back that price, which is why he was so good in 2021, because he was a 3rd-round pick. And he is the one guy out of these people that I can't justify taking with a top 2-round pick. Maybe late 2nd. But he's 30 years old. He's already dealt with 2 major injuries. I hope he can get back to where he was, but if he doesn't, I can't say anybody should be surprised.
And then we will quickly talk about Devontae Smith. You have him at 14. I have him at 15. Not the best rookie year. 916 yards, 64 catches, 104 targets, but a big step up this year. 136 targets, 95 catches, almost 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. Definitely with the help of some boom games in there for sure. Had a massive game against, I know they're here somewhere, had a massive game against Dallas. Had a good 20s in there, put up a big game against Washington. He went scoreless in week 1 against Detroit, 15 against Minnesota, 30 against Washington, 4 against Jacksonville, 18, 15, 7, 4, 14, 13, 9, 21, 17, 20, 31, 20, and 13. So almost a safe floor. There's a couple games in there that would really piss you off as a fantasy manager, but he is 24 years old on one of the best teams. if not the best team in the NFC and one of the best teams in the NFL. So I expect him to get better. I just need to see it a little more and see how the Eagles are tackled this year as a team, as an offense, how they improve. What do you think about Devontae?
He's 24 years old. He's the only Heisman that's been a receiver since Desmond Howard, if I'm correct. The value's baked in the spot for me. He's 14, and there's a reason for that. He's undersized at the position. He's 6 foot, 170 pounds, which does draw some concern for his longevity. But there's not a single better player to have across from him than AJ Brown. They're almost like opposites. And I think there's not a better spectacular catch guy within reason than Devonta Smith. He pulled down some absolutely insane throws from Jalen Hurts. And I think he's going to constantly improve. He's an insane route runner, as is. His hands are as sure as some of the top guys in this league. And I just expect his usage to continually increase. If I have Jalen Waddle at 4, Devonta Smith being at 14, it's not for lack of Devonta Smith's effort. He doesn't have the top end speed of a Jalen Waddle, and that matters in fantasy to me. But Devonta Smith, I'm going to be targeting him at his price next year. Because as a wide receiver too, I don't think you're going to find better floors than a guy like Devonta Smith unless you are able to just hammer receiver the first 2 rounds and come out with like a Tyreek Hill, like a Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle like type situation, which I had in a couple of leagues this year. But I think Devonta Smith is probably going to pay. He's probably the best return on investment out of anybody on this list because he put up 1196 alongside AJ Brown's 1400. And who's to say those numbers can't flip? Because I think they're incredibly talented in the same ways. And it's gonna be interesting to see, and especially if Jalen Hurts continues to take those steps. I think they could both be 1,300-yard guys. Because from T. Higgins, a guy that I'm super high on because of what he could do outside of the system, Devonta Smith's put up a better than T. Higgins has had in his career yet. And T's playing with arguably a better receiver in Jamar Chase. So I think the ceiling is the floor for Devonta Smith. It's all going to come down to how they scheme. If they actually open up the playbook to Jalen Hurts as he progresses and they throw the ball a bit more because they are the best rushing attack in football as of last year. But if they allow Hurts to throw more, Devonta Smith is going to be a direct beneficiary.
Okay, so excuse me. We're going to end a little early tonight because, as you can see, I'm not 10,000% here. But obviously, more fantasy next week for sure. We'll be doing tight ends. We'll be talking more free agency as more stuff happens. Some big stuff, some okay stuff happened today. A lot of defenders, tackles, and got signed. Jimmy is a Raider. Derek's a Saint. So there's some things we have to talk about for sure. Teams are making cap space, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes with that. Of course, with the draft coming up, we'll look at all the rookies. Carolina has the number 1 pick now. DJ Moore is a Bear. There's a lot going on. There's been a lot going on, and we only missed 1 week. So, shame on us. Shame on me. It's not Devin's fault, but it's all right. What about you, Mr. Devin?
I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm trying to log into the Anchor so I can get you guys some Spotify audio, see how that works out. Worst case, expect it on Wednesday as opposed to Tuesday. No, I really enjoy the off-season content. I'm just gearing up for the draft. I think this is going to be one of the better drafts of the last 3 years in terms of just overall talent, top to bottom. The top end might not be as high, but I think it's going to be really interesting looking towards our mock draft and reacting to free agency and where the draft's going to play everything out. Pour one out for your favorite team if they're on the verge of trading their best weapon in the last half decade, or, celebrate because your team was able to add a key player like Javon Hargrave to the Niners. The rich get richer. But we thank you guys for tuning in. Go ahead and grill me on Twitter for my Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson and Barony for DK Metcalf at 6. Because honestly, the more I talked about it, the more silly I kind of felt at times, but I do think the case is so. These opinions are not legally binding. It's what makes fantasy great. A list is a list, and it's all about the people that are behind them. But yeah, no, it's always a blast. And that's it for me, man.
All right. You know how to end it as usual.
Peace.